Hello everyone to another episode of Blender Today. I'm your host tonight, Dalai Felinto. Today I have a very special guest with me tonight. Let's say hello for Mr. Francisco City.
Hello, hi. Do you have sound effects?
I do, but not now.
Okay.
And I should turn the ads off.
Okay.
We're gonna start talking about the big funding campaign we're having now for the end of the year, and then we go through the usual shows talking about the features and a few the changes in the Blender project. Francisco,
Yes.
here I go.
Okay, so I came here today to
Look
do
at there.
an appeal specifically. No, we were talking today with Dalai, and he said, "Hey, come by to share what is going on," because last week we launched the campaign. It's the first time that we do something at this scale to really try and rally the community behind this. It was like since the 2.8, like the Code Quest times, I think, that we haven't done something like this.
Yeah.
And
We're talking about the Blender Development Fund campaign. So if you go to fund.blender.org, basically gonna see what you set it up. That's gonna be there throughout, I guess, December until January 3rd.
yeah, January, until the end of January 2nd. So that the whole point of this campaign was to really reach out to the Blender community and do what you could consider a fundraiser, and we really try to make it more fun than just a fundraiser or a donation drive, to really give it a purpose also. And as you can see from the way we are communicating about this, it's about doing a gift. It's about giving a gift for Blender's birthday, because on the 2nd of January, Blender becomes 30 years old, which is quite a milestone. And so the whole point is like, let's all get together and give a little gift. It doesn't take much. Everyone can do a little bit, and we try to set ourselves a goal. It's really hard these days. Like, also, if you look at other campaigns, other projects, how they do this kind of fundraising, this kind of communication, it's difficult to say you want to have X money or you want to have this specific target, because the project is ongoing. A lot of things are going very well. What we want to make sure is that there is a good balance between our corporate and kind of the business relationship that Blender has and the community, because the goal of the Blender project is, of course, to stay independent and to keep its independence from everyone. So having good support from the community is really essential. And so the whole point of this campaign is to say, hey, everyone, every little bit counts, every single donation counts. And I was just thinking now, in average, a Blender Today episode gets around 10,000 views.
10,000 views, combining live and after the fact.
Yeah, so we have set ourselves a target of 10,000 gifts. So if everyone that is watching this video would actually donate once, we would actually reach the target that we set for ourselves, which is not strictly a financial one. Is more one to show that there is a community support behind Blender. It's really about giving something. So it doesn't matter how much it is. We really want to try to get to that 10,000 number before the end of the year. And so basically we put together a page and try to visualize it in a fun and interactive way. So if you go to fun.blender.org, you see this website, and there are all these little boxes, and each box is a gift. And there are smaller gifts, bigger gifts, and if you hover with your mouse on top of it, you can actually see who gave the gift. And if you donate something, you can see the amount. If you are into privacy and you don't want to show your name, you can just not put anything, and it's just going to say someone donated a certain amount. And that's like a very cool way to bring everyone together. There is some technical challenges to build a page like this. It's going to be very cool when it scales up. Like having 10,000 of these little boxes in the web browser is going to be fun, and we try to build it in a way that it scales well. In a way, it's a little bit inspired by the place, the project from Reddit, where every user could go and paint a little pixel to build this giant artwork. Like, I really love the idea to visualize the entire community of supporters in one page, so that you can find yourself in this little map and see what you did for Blender. If you donate, your square will be red, so you can actually see a little square dropping the moment you donate, and then you can always find yourself in this giant sea of gifts.
And why? So let's say, which pages do we get to see this banner right now? This is a whole campaign, right? In every one of Blender domains.
So we started the campaign last week, and we are still in the process of of rolling it out. Last week we put banners for the first time, actually, really to try and go out and be more visible in every one of the major Blender websites. So you might have seen it. You might be familiar with these patterns. You know, when you go on Wikipedia at that time of the year and they get a banner at the top this week, we try to make it like so that it's not too disruptive, but yet you hopefully still notice it. So in Dev Talk, in the BlenderToday website, in the code blog, everywhere somebody dismissed their banner.
Somebody dismissed their banner already.
So it's okay, you know. That's like one way, and to really maximize the use of our channels, and also like to put it on social media. Today I posted it on Instagram. Like we try to kind of schedule it so that it's not all at the same time, so that we can keep a little bit of momentum. And most importantly, this week I really we plan to reach out to a lot of people in the community that have a bit of visibility to help to kind of broadcast this message further. And I hope that we get, you know, support from everyone to really make this very clear. And there are many ways to look at this, of course, right? Of what does it mean to do this kind of campaign? What does it mean to donate? But we try to keep it really, really simple. So also for you, if you want to share the message further with everyone, is like about doing a birthday gift for Blender, and any amount counts. So that's what I'm actually gonna go continue doing now. This has been my life for the past few weeks, and of course, like special thanks to Anna, Oleg, Martin, and Pablo that have been spending a lot of time working on putting together this project to make it possible. And I've been working with them, and I go back working with them actually to continue rolling this out and reaching out to more people to make it like the most successful campaign.
I have a question from the development team, because the last campaign I remember, so the Code Quest, also granted people a little bit something, the little badge, you know, the Code Quest badge,
yeah,
which is highly seeked, but you know, was one in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah.
And then I know developers who were here joining the Blender Code Quest did not get the badge because, yeah, they didn't put money, right? That would be a little bit almost like money laundry, some might say.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it true that anyone that wants that badge, even people here working for Blender, should
Everyone
go
should have one
out of their way and then donate some money? Do they get it for free?
Yeah, I think
now's the time of the truth.
I think contributors they are entitled to be part of the same way we made a little.
I was ready to donate $10 to Blender. You just lost contribution, buddy.
Yeah, I think the gift one, because the Code Quest campaign, it was like you were part of the Code Quest campaign, right? So developers that were in the Code Quest, everyone should have a badge. We made hoods. We made like little custom patches that you could put on your jacket. So that's like, if you are a developer that was part of the project, of course you should do it. For the donation, I am not 100%, because sure, like I think this is if you donate, right?
I agree. No, I agree.
So I think you should. I donated.
I will. I will show you next week my red box here.
Yeah, I think we come back next week to just give a little update. So now we are at basically 30%, which is 3K out of 10. So I come back next week and we should be halfway at least. So we can actually see if this video works. Like if you use Blender and you enjoy it and you have downloaded it and played with it and it brings something to your life, consider giving something back to the project this month to celebrate that it becomes 30 years old next January.
Oh, that's perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Francesco.
Yeah, thank you, Dalai, and awesome that you keep
here.
it up. Hi to everyone. Hi to Pablo that is watching and be like, they took my baby.
Pablo's being like essential here.
See you.
Well, sorry about the audio out of sync in the beginning. Seems to be working now. Oh, people want still. Well, if the audio is out of sync, let me know. Usually you do the little bit audio checkup in the beginning, but I think seems to be better now. So if you still have audio delays, just restart your web page. All right. Donation is one of the main source of Blender income. So that's indeed the best way you can help Blender, to thrive. We of course have the community involved in the development, but there is a fixed cost for the headquarters, for the people in the payroll. So we're very, thankful for everyone that can donate. If you cannot donate, you don't need to feel bad. At least maybe help spreading the word, because a lot of people don't even know how Blender, continue going and is this ongoing project. So if they know that, oh, it's a donation, oh, maybe I can help. Maybe you can help. All right, now to our transition. So another topic today is the Blender 4.0. Where is my screen? There we go. So Blender 4.0 has a new release, a new update, is the 4.0.2. This is one of our incremental corrective releases, because there's still going to be a few months until Blender 4.1 is out, and we found a few critical issues that needed to be addressed before that. So if you go to blender.org, and remind me later. If you go to blender.org and you go to your usual download page, you're gonna see the 4.0.2 option there to download. So go ahead and update. We have a few bug fixes. A lot of them are crashes. Those are the indisputable bug fixes we try to port over. So not only I would suggest people to download Blender, but also to keep running, keep testing it, and reporting issues. Most of it is indeed like crashes and bug fixes for crashes. So that was Tuesday last week. Now I did select a few changes from the changelog. But before talking about all of them, I singled out a few of the ongoing design and discussions that are happening with geometry nodes. It's a project that's still very close to my heart. And I think it's interesting to share not only final features, but sometimes, not always, what the developers are cooking. Also because this week, again, there's not a lot of new features going on, but a lot of fixes, a lot of cleanups. So let's go here, quickly show the new bake node that Jacques is preparing. And basically the idea is to unify the baking pipeline for simulation nodes and the bake specific nodes for geometry nodes. Here's a proposal. It's open already for people to test and give feedback. The idea is that you can just bake the entire, let's say, animation for your geometry node scene within the node editor, but you should still have a scene overview of all your bake objects and modifiers and everything that has a bake. People that do geometry nodes probably know what we're talking about, so go there. The other thing interesting about geometry nodes happening right now is about the volume grid. Until January, you are trying to wrap up a lot of the volume development. So Lucas is taking the lead on that one. And basically, we try to introduce a new concept of a grid, volume grid, that you can do operations isolated from the geometry. And you can simulate fire. Well, this is like the building block for people to simulate fire, simulate smoke, simulate fluid. We have already a task with the overall view of every single node he's thinking about implementing it. He might not be able to implement all of them until next year, but we're definitely going to document them so people from the community can also help implement. Why he might not be able to implement everything until next year, and why does that matter? Because in January, we're thinking about shifting gears, and there's a bit of a spoiler. I mentioned this already last week in regard to what we're doing for the planning of Blender this year, or next year. And then we want basically to finish up ongoing projects. We have a few too many ongoing projects, Eevee Next, Grease Pencil, the extensions website, you name it. And we want to make sure we can put a few projects on hold and have more developers working together. So for example, we want the jump to nodes team, so Jack, Hans, Lucas, to help Falk David with the Grease Pencil 3 project. This is another project we mentioned last week. Remember when you talked about the code quest, or not the code quest, how did you call the task force for Grease Pencil? We want to still welcome the community to wrap up the Grease Pencil 3, but we also acknowledge that if you can do it shorter, it's going to be better. Oh, let me spoil a little bit more. So this is going to be, I'm probably going to be writing about this next week or the one afterwards, and it's going to be part of our end of the year celebration. We always have a blog post about what we expect, which projects to look forward to, what are the new features. And in the past we have been maybe over promising, right? We have this one feature we have in mind, and we don't know for certain how it's going to be panned out throughout the year. And this year we're going to shift the gears a little bit, and the idea is to focus on the first quarter and the second quarter. And for the first quarter, try to have those big projects tackled. Even Next, Grease Pencil 3, extensions, website, and the compositor. Oh, what happens with Cycles? Well, Cycles is still ongoing, and there's still a lot of contribution from the community. What happens to SD? The same. The Animation 2025 project is still ongoing, so this is going to take most of the 2024. You can see it here in blue in the screen. But that's more like a spoiler. We'll hear more about that later. And then the second quarter, we do new projects. So it's also interesting. I'd love to hear maybe from people, from you basically in the comments or in the chat, what do you think? Because that means that during the first quarter, jump to nodes, we have almost no development. In a way similar to the, let's say, the motion tracking part of Blender, right? We have this part of Blender that's working, and we move on to focus on different parts of Blender. Sometimes we go back and revisit that area and keep improving on it. Of course, geometry nodes is more new, and we have no hard time finding what to prioritize and what else we can implement. But it's also an interesting experiment to say that, hey, for 3 months, we won't be developing geometry nodes a lot more than module development. The geometry nodes already can do a bunch of stuff, and people can, take the tools we have and just use them for a little bit. I hope that should be fine. What else do we have? As usual, if you have any questions, you can go to the BlenderToday website. I already had a post about today's episode, and you can just add your questions there, and I'm going to try to get to it at the end of the show. Someone even mentioned that it would be more interesting to focus on the questions instead of the new features, because you can always go to the new features. I'd always wonder if people like the live demo of the features and the comments on them, or the questions. But as usual, let's try to do a little bit of both. So let's get started. We have here Jeroen tightened up a little bit the 3D brush project. This is one of those ongoing projects we want to finish next year, but it is a project for the second quarter. But because it's definitely going to be in the agenda, I think he basically was revisiting his old branch and see what he could do instead of checking the status of it. So it's not something that that users will get to benefit right away from that. It's in main, is in the core of Blender, but it's hidden under experimental options. BMesh, for those that do not know, BMesh is the data structure behind our mesh representation for edit mode. So if you go to Blender edit mode, this is the so-called BMesh. So you're going to see improvements like performance from Hans, copying attributes. I don't even know why Hans is working on that, because I know he's the one also favoring us to find other ways to represent the mesh that could be faster than BMesh, because BMesh has a lot of performance problems. BMesh is optimized for people writing tools on top of that. So Blender uses a double half-edge mesh representation, That's the name. And it's intended to make it very simple for you to find, for instance, the neighbors of a corner. So if you have a face, want to quickly find the neighbors or the loop around that. And that is nice for tools. That's what allowed a lot of the new tools we had for 2.5. I think that's when BMesh was introduced in Blender, but that has a few performance problems. So even for geometry nodes, one of the reasons we just don't port any operator we have in the edit mode as a node, because you don't want to use their BMesh equivalent. You want to rewrite them in a more efficient way. So, build. This is actually interesting. It's a bit invisible, but I'll explain what's happening here. So Brecht van Lommel is doing something in regard to change our debug flag. So when you download Blender from the builder bot, so builder.blender.org, you get what's called a release build. It's very optimized, very stable, and one of the reasons is also faster than what developers use is because it doesn't print much information. It doesn't have all the bloated information useful for development. So for development, the developers use a debug build. However, there are a few bugs you can only catch on debug build and not in a release build. So how can I show that in an interesting way? So every day, not only we build a daily version of Blender for people to download and test, we also, getting technical here, we also have like a farm of computers that are constantly building Blender after every commit, after every change, to see if anything Blender broke. So we have those unit tests which run every time something changes in Blender. But we are running them only for release, and now we're going to start running them also for debug, because there was a big problem last week which would have been caught if the build bot was running that. So this is what this is about. More internal features for development. Every time you see CMake is also for people building their own version of Blender. Not very interesting. Few changes in compositor. Okay, let's go to this one here from Adam Carlisle. Never knew how to say his last name. Carlisle. So Aaron is part of the documentation team. He actually leads the documentation effort in Blender. We welcome contributions, of course, but he's the one makes sure that every new feature is properly covered in the user manual. And now, if you as a user is browsing something, you're inside any page, learning about modeling, extrude, region. Now in the back, there's a new button called Report Issue on this page. That is the user manual equivalent for reporting a bug, but for the manual. So basically, if you go there and click here, you are sent to our development platform, and you can just start, hey, this, I don't know, this feature no longer exists in Blender, or this description is wrong. Since the manual is so accessible, as in everyone can write documentation, I would even go as far as recommending people to suggest what the text should be in this case. Good job, Aaron. EV Next has a few new, I always forget if Pablo put the piping between those sections. Let's do it. EV Next has a few new, not much features, but is kind of catching up on the feature parity with the EV legacy. So Jeroen now made sure the look dev has the nice look dev preview using the EV Next. So if you're using cycles now and go to material mode, you're gonna get EV Next being used for that. We also have work from Miguel Pozo and Clément Foucault. A few fixes, a big refactor from the ray tracing pipeline that doesn't bring any benefit yet for users. But as we know, in the future, EV Next should be able to support hardware like GPU ray tracing for computers that can support that. So this is paving the way for that. EV Next, which as we mentioned is going to be one of the targets for Q1, with basically still Clément and Miguel, but also Irumbacher more focused on that. Oh, this one. I'm gonna mention this one because you'll see why. So to fix a bug, let's go through the breadcrumbs here. Ludwig Kalteny last month reported a bug where basically if the scene was too high poly, they couldn't type properly. I think it couldn't do double clicking for typing for input. And then Campbell Barton, who maintains that area of Blender, sorry, closing some tabs here, basically implemented a fix for that using something called timestamps. I don't even know what that is. That introduced its own set of bugs, however. How do I find it? But basically was crashing Blender if you're trying to do any of the dead keys. So like the acute A, acute U, which is common in Portuguese, Spanish, French, Latin words, and more. So there's a fix for the fix, which I think is this one here. That's not very interesting for most people when you see Ghost, but Ghost is the layer in between Blender and the operating system. So it's the layer of Blender that talks specifically with Windows or with Linux or with Mac. And then from there on, everything just Blender and is the same code for any platform. So Campbell is the maintainer, Campbell Barton, of the Linux system within Blender, and he's been doing fixes left and right. I think the issue that, the issue that introduced the problem was this one here, when you started supporting these so-called timestamps. And then I was like, that broke my Blender. And that was last week, 3 days ago, I think it was Friday, and then Campbell just went ahead and fixed it. So it's very important to try the daily Blender for whenever possible to help finding those issues before it becomes more critical to more people. Thanks, Campbell, for fixing that issue. There is a few new improvements for Grease Pencil 3. Just to remind ourselves, Grease Pencil 3 is a new Grease Pencil that's only available if you go to Preferences, enable Developer Extras, Experimental, and Grease Pencil 3. I will go over one of them specifically. It was Pratik Borhade, who is part of our triaging team, is also fixing a lot of bugs. And basically he implemented a clean loose points operator. That means within Blender, if I go to my Grease Pencil object and I have a few drawings which are very simple, they only have a 1 point, 7 points. Now you can go to Grease Pencil, clean loose points, choose your limit, let's say just 1, and then it's gone. I wonder why I cannot redo. That's a bug, right? Because that's a bug. Because we either don't show this option here to redo, or we redo it and support that. So one for the list of bugs this week. But this is nice. This is nothing revolutionary in the sense that this operator was there already for the old Grease Pencil. So let's go to the old Grease Pencil here. This is the old Grease Pencil, and as you can see in edit mode, you have a lot more operators. But it's nice to start to have those operators into the new Grease Pencil. So we're getting closer to finish that project. Thank you, Pratik. The other thing I want to show, I found it funny. If you see one of the commits from Falk David, who is leading the Grease Pencil 3 project, helping to coordinate the module as well. He mentioned about drawing placement. How with Grease Pencil you can choose whether you want your drawings to be in the origin, in a fixed place, fix this from the camera, and on and on. However, if you go over his commit message, he said, hey, just FYI, drawing on other strokes currently does not work because Grease Pencil 3 cannot be rendered to image yet. And it's funny to see that a few days later, might have been the same day. When did he commit this one? This was, when was this committed? It doesn't matter when, but a few days later he goes ahead and implement the render to image option to the Grease Pencil. I believe this also means you can, let's try, you can go to the viewport and do render viewport. So that's the old, sorry, wrong button, render image. Oh, where is this nowadays? Right here, viewport render image. So this is still the old Grease Pencil. And if you go to the new Grease Pencil, this should be working now. I think one thing I'll try to do next week is to have the old Blender. Then it's nice to compare what wasn't working with what is working. Let's add a new Grease Pencil, our good old Suzanne. Go to View, Viewport Render Image, and voila. So, good job, folk. Good job, team. I have a few contributions from Case Bianco Davis from the community. Thank you so much. Basically a few options for the overlay for the Grease Pencil drawing. Only one change from geometry nodes from the Ilya Katwashok mod on the chat. It's one of the active contributors of the geometry nodes. And this is a performance improvement basically for the face group boundaries. Just quickly see how much more we have. As people mentioned, might be interested to focus on questions, so start thinking about questions and ideally do post them here in the BlenderToday post. This link is also in the description of the live stream, so you can go there. Let's see what's interesting here. A lot of sculpting commits by Hans. Hans and Sergey were wrapping up their contributions to the dynamic topology. And for this year, there's still two main targets missing, which one is the interpolation of the attributes in a few cases. And the other one is to support face corner as attribute. And this is going to be the end of the dynamic remesh project until next year, where we might focus on performance for sculpting as part of the Q2. So that planning we're talking about, one of the ideas to consider it finished what we did for dynamic topology, dynamic remesh. Sorry, that's the same, right? Consider it finished. Now we have the attribute propagation for any of the attributes while you do the remesh, and then next year we can focus on optimization as a whole, because it's not the optimization problems we have with dynamic remesh is not really tied to the dynamic topology itself, but is more of the sculpting mode as a whole. So we're going to see Hans, helping more and more this area of Blender. A bunch of refactors. Refactor is development lingo to say, hey, just cleaning up the house. Should have been no change should come of this, so no visual user-facing change should come out of this. But those are needed for the future. Sometimes they do introduce bugs though. Shame on the developers, but it's not often. And a few changes on the Python API. That's an interesting one. So this is for the override. Basically, you can pass the string as part of the context temp override in Python. And this was a request by the team from the Blender Beam. Blender Beam is a very popular CAD plugin for Blender, add-on for Blender. Basically, it's introduced a whole Beam pipeline within Blender. And one of their developers sent us a few pull requests about what they actually needed, what was blocking for them. And I believe I even have on DevTalk meeting notes from when I talked to one of them. Let's see. Yeah, here. Because in November, I shared a kind of a panel with Dion Moat from the Blender Main project. Then we got to know each other, and they say, no, why don't we connect and talk a little bit about how are you guys using Blender itself, if there's any showstopper for you, how's the Blender API working for you guys. And the one big showstopper Dion mentioned was this bug with context override, which is now fixed. And the nice thing is, because they not only reported the bug, but they also contributed with the patch. Talking to them just helped us to see that this patch was indeed very important. And that's usually shouldn't be needed, right? People shouldn't have to reach out to developers. And usually then we ask people in the bug report itself or in the patch to convey how is this going to be used. But I'm very happy to see this finally addressed. So thanks Campbell Barton for reviewing, but also the Blender being spotting the problem, proposing a fix, and keep maintaining the fix. Shader changes. Wow, so many invisible changes. I wonder if there's a reason in here. So one of the changes that Brecht committed, Brecht van Lommel, is that default now if you create a new shader, the IOR, the refraction index goes from 1.45 to 1.5. Okay, there's a reason for that, because that's the OpenPBR and standard surface default. Okay, let's see if it's that's real. You go to Blender, we add a new, go to shading, there we go, 1.5. Now the real deal is if I reset the value, should go back to 1.5. Some parts of Blender support this, not all of them. The resolution should support this, yeah, but not all of them. One day all of Blender are going to support this. You know what, let me show you something else. Remember how we talked about the build bot that's constantly building Blender to find problems? This is constantly building Blender for every change that's officially committed to Blender. But on top of that, developers can also go to a patch and say, hey, build bot, can you please try to build Blender and see if this is crashing anything. So if you're following the patches in Blender and see someone say, hey, at BlenderBot build or package, that means they are trying to see if that commit's gonna break something. You see here package Windows, so with this you can go and download specifically for Windows this one patch, which is now archived already, but archived, or maybe it failed to build. What else? I think we went over most of the features. As I mentioned, there wasn't a lot of features this week. It's been mostly fixes and small improvements. We have a few still changes for metal by Jason Fielder. Jason Fielder is, let's see if he show his affiliation here. He should. But anyway, he works for Apple. He's an Apple engineer who is commissioned to contribute to Blender as part of his job. Thank you, Apple. Thank you, Jason. And I mean, I think that's gonna be the last one, and then we go to for two more I want to show, and then we go for questions. We now have Belarusian language in the UI translator, and is also available in our Weblet, is our online interface for helping translate in Blender. I forgot the URL. I think it's translation.blender.org. Translations.blender.org. No, translation. I forgot the URL, but now it supports Belarusian as well. That's super nice. Translate.blender.org. My bad. There we go. So now both the manual and UI, are supported by this are the way to contribute to the translation of both the UI, the user interface of Blender, and the user manual is through the weblet to translate.blender.org. And now if you go to languages and to Belarusia, it's here, Belarusian, they are probably one string translated. Well, one of many to come. And finally, I wanted to show you the work from Guillermo Venegas, which has been quite active, I've noticed, in a recent time. And he's adding support for what's going to be a better drag and drop for any file format. The idea is that we have more ways to control what happens after with a file, basically, any of the files. The design task is a bit big. It shows that I created, but I created as a placeholder. I think Brecht was the one who wrote most of these. But this is improvement towards supporting drag and drop and supporting collections for import and export. We want to be able to take a whole collection and say, hey, this collection comes from a USD file, an Alembic file, and hey, update that collection, or hey, now bake it and keep it live. So we're seeing a lot of move in that direction for the USD team. I think Jesse even committed something this week for that. Now, but you see Jesse's work, Jesse Jurkovic, he's working on the USD. He's part of the Blender team as of a few months ago, and he's helping with a lot of the roadmap we have for USD. Well, finally, because it's now in front of us, we have a few performance improvements on the video editor. First, the performance improvements by Aras Prankavicius. Aras has been contributing performance improvements for Blender for more than 1 year. He was working on the OBJ importer in the beginning. I know he has interest on helping the FBX importer as well. So he's a very valid member of the community. He's a veteran in the game industry. A lot of people know him. And now he's back with more free time to contribute to Blender. And also in the video sequence editor, we now have copy and paste, which we didn't have it, or we didn't have as widely supported as we now have. This was work by Sebastian Parboch. He did this for the studio here, for the Gold project, and it was I think it was reviewed by Bastien Montaigne. So sequence copy and paste, and that should work even across blend files. So let's demo this one. This was really nice. Let's go to the VSC. So video editing. Video editing. Let's say I have a text string, text strip. Call it Blender Today. Let's make it larger and rotate. Okay, now let's open a new Blender. And see if we can copy and paste between Blender sessions. This is the other Blender. I go to video editing, have nothing here. So here I'm gonna, let's see if you can see this well. Yeah. On this Blender, I'm gonna copy it. So Control C, copy it. On this other Blender, are you nervous? We're gonna paste 3, 2, 1. Chana! Nice work. Nice work. Nice work. Wow. Nice work, studio. That is something the studio here needed, and it's very nice that they have someone dedicated to help with the whole infrastructure, and every now and then can also support the Blender development with these features here and there. So thanks not only for people supporting the Blender Development Fund, but also for people supporting the Blender Studio as a subscriber. So thank you. Ooh, okay, now we're gonna switch to no. We're gonna switch to questions. I'm still lost on the whole setup from Pablo here. Alright, so if you have a question, get them ready. I will also open some questions to the live chat, because that's the part of the point, right? You're here watching together, watching live. It's nice to be able to have some back and forth. As usual, we go over questions with more hearts, but any questions appreciated. Thanks so much. So from bottom to up, because those are questions who were being posted earlier. Hey Dalai, he really likes improvements on the video editor. So do I, and as we demo now, it's very nice to see love and care in that area of Blender. Ooh, people even considering ditching all their tools in favor of the video editor. However, there's something missing, which is performance for rendering. Other tools render them way faster, and there was talks in the past about improving the VSC performance drastically. This is a project task from 3 years ago, and the question basically is what happened to that? Is this still ongoing? What is the status of the milestones? I know for one that I think snapping and retiming are finished, so maybe they could be ticked. I probably could poke Francisco about that, or Richard. And a lot of the media management, I think, was also implemented, I believe. But to keep it simple, as I mentioned at the beginning of this year, in the beginning of this live stream, the goal for next year is to finish ongoing projects. And the VSC is in this weird state where it's not an ongoing project, because it's already established part of Blender and it's working, but with shortcomings. But we do plan to have at some point some design sections for the new story layout pipeline, where all the way from storyboarding all the way to layout, you can use Blender and the video editor in an integrated way. So you can use, for instance, grease pencil, and you start like boarding your scene. From that, you can transition to animatics with your 3D camera and some placeholder objects. And from there, you can move straight to a layout already if you're seeing with the proper camera, proper lens, basically the characters. And I believe that at that point, you're definitely gonna take a look at the performance. So it's known, the project is still ongoing. The features that are listed there are in a way independent of performance, like the media, media view, media collection, media management, for example. But we also know that it doesn't help to dress up the whatever, the bird. If the bird is still a bird, it doesn't fly. Birds fly though. So hopefully next year we see more of that. But as we can see here, there's been performance improvements. Thank Aras, new features. Thank you, Sebastian. And thanks for your question, Alexei. Now a question from Rinswind 3D. What are the showstoppers that are from getting us a final solution for multi-res shape case, or basically sculpting layers? So what's preventing us from having sculpting layers? That being the agenda, basically. When we decided to focus on the dynamic retopology, we knew that for some users this is less important, and they were indeed dying for layered sculpting. There's some similarities in the code base, because we want to make sure the code, basically the same code, right, the sculpting in Blender. And we knew that just by having Sergey and Hans revisiting that code and improving it and doing those cleanups, that would help any future project for sculpting. But in the end, we had to decide between wrap up the dynamic retopology, which is something people were excited about and has already started. There was a lot of people following the project closer, or starting something new, which would be the layered sculpting. and we made a call, you know what, let's show to the community that this project is still ongoing, that sculpting is not abandoned, and we went to that route instead. I hope that answered your question in some way. Thanks for your question though. Daniela Palme. Hey Dalai, happy holiday seasons. Happy holiday seasons, everyone. Well, I'm doing well, thanks. So, I was wondering why the changes to the rotation socket from the vector socket. So basically in geometry nodes, now we have a new socket type, which is the rotation socket, and we're also going to have the matrix socket soon. I can show that. Well, let's read the whole question, then I show it. Why the change? Is it because the rotation socket is quaternion and has advantages? People are curious. So Daniela Palme, or Daniela Palme. Let's find those nodes. There we go. And for the user, it's a bit tricky because the rotation socket here are indistinguishable from the vector socket. Let's get some of the other ones here. But the main, let me get all of them here before I say something wrong. Okay. The first thing to notice is that some of the real rotation sockets, I believe, are the pink ones. I believe Hans is not today in the chat, otherwise he could confirm. Because we started introducing the rotation socket only for a few sockets, for a few nodes. Let's double check what I'm saying before I say something wrong. Rotation, yeah, it's the pink one. But some of the other nodes, like the rotate Euler, is still couldn't be changed in time for the next Blender. So we have a little bit of a legacy here. So if you see things like instance rotation, all we have is a simple vector. But if things like the quaternion to Euler, then you have the pink one, which is the new one. And basically, indeed, the pink vector is a quaternion. It's a more interchangeable rotation that you can convert to Euler, to other formats of rotation. Gives people more control. And a rotation is not, because a vector is a way to represent a rotation, but a rotation is a vector with meaning. Because a quaternion is just also is a vector with 4 components, but each component has a specific meaning. I could have a Euler rotation that, the order maybe is x, z, y, and that's something very specific. So again, even the same vector 3 representing an Euler rotation could be encoding something different. So a rotation socket is a more universal way to handle that. And coming soon are the matrix sockets, and hopefully they help a little bit for people that need to do low-level physics calculation with geometry nodes. Do we have any questions from the chat? Oh, okay, I'll take one question from the chat. Good timing. So Tertian is asking whether we abandoned any updates to the shading texture painting tools. Definitely not. The texture painting tools are going to be revisited next year, not in the first quarter, but we're planning for the second quarter to work a little bit on the texture polishing task. Let's see if I can find that for us. Issues. Let me try to. So basically the idea is to take the existing pipeline without much changes and fix the things we know how to fix. So paint polishing. Let me find this one because this is here. Polishing the painting experience. So this task here is intended as part of the 3D brush project next year. So we want to do the 3D brush we also want to use the 3D brush in the 2D editors in Blender. So the UV editor, the image editor, because a lot of the problems we have at the moment, like bleeding issues or the 8/16-bit texture problem, are non-existent with the 3D brush, which has its own set of problems. But basically, we are planning to bring this next year, even without revolutionizing the painting in Blender, but to at least bring performance and bring a 3D brush. And then maybe at some point, hopefully sooner than later, we can also work on the layer texture project, but that's too big to promise. Let's see if any of the unhearted questions we can squeeze in. Oh, the benchmark score for the same device decreased over time or changed over time. I wouldn't. Well, I think it makes sense, right? I would expect it always to go down, because so basically the graphic cards, specific graphic cards, if you keep testing them over every Blender, their median score tends to go down. You always have to look to the number of benchmarks, like how many people have been running those. But because we get new graphic cards every year, the new ones are gonna tend to score higher in the overall benchmark ranking system. And then if you have a graphic card which basically doesn't change, right, it gets what, a driver update, it's gonna tend to drag to the bottom. That said, we do have a few, and related to that, we do have, let's say, new technology that we try to leverage within Blender. So for instance, we refactored the whole principal BSDF for Blender 4.0. And sometimes, it might be this case here as well, some of the graphic cards cannot leverage the tools, the optimization tools we have, the new features. Basically, in this case, it's a confirmed problem. Probably we are even mentioned here in the chat. Whoever is live can follow on the chat. So it's specifically lower because of the principal shader. And again, new graphic cards get a new driver. They're always going to be up to date to the latest features. Some of them might start falling behind. Thanks for the question. We have the time is actually technically over, but I can help but answer a question about snapping. For the future, for the next episode, if you feel like we could even start with questions, it's also an option. Let me know. Otherwise, you're going to stick to this format because it's working well. So Malars asked about snapping, in particular functionality about arranging objects and their rotations in relate to the other objects in the scene. There might be a bug. I won't read the bug now, but if you do believe there's a bug, just go to Blender, go to help, and then report as a bug. Germano Cavalcante is one of the bug triagers, is also the person maintaining the Blender snapping system. I'll be very happy to look at that. So, and even whether, if you're not sure about whether it's a bug, just go in and comment that. And then there's a bit of questions. Those long questions are hard to address live because it needs some like decompressing here. But let's see. Is it possible for Blender to have surface snapping in edit mode taking into account? It's possible. So maybe sneak this in as part of your bug report. Shouldn't do it, but people can also look the other way. There's been a lot of improvements on the snap system recently, right? We got the base snap. I love it. And I think it's maybe a good time also to address some of the other low-hanging fruits. If anyone wants to help contribute to that part of Blender, you're also welcome to do that. Ooh, I think we finished. People asking about USD. Follow USD. We have a new developer hired only to help coordinating the USD effort. So there's that. Gonna very quickly crease aware subdivision and or smooth modifier operation anytime soon. Yes, because now we have node-based tools, so people can probably do these themselves. If you need something that specific, you might be better off maybe implementing it yourself and sharing with everyone else. Things like the crease, so you go to edit mode, edge, and you mark the crease. Those things they tend to disappear over time, or we have less of them, because those are hard-coded functionality that has a hard-coded visualization. And instead, we see in the future more people building their own tools and marking their edges as pinned edge for subdivision. I guess that's probably what you want in this case. And then you have another operator that say, hey, subdivide, taking those pinned edges into account. And you can have those tools with this kind of synergy among themselves. Thank you. I think we're gonna stop here. Once again, thanks everyone for joining us today. We still have another show next week, and then we stop for a holiday break. It's gonna be a holiday here in the North Hemisphere and in a few other places as well, I believe. As usual, if you have any questions, remember to put on the thread. Remember to like the video, show support. Remember to donate, if possible, to the funding campaign. Let's end showing that right now. So we started with 3. Next week, you're gonna write down in the beginning of the show what's the initial number and the final number. Now I forgot the numbers. But thanks everyone who's been donating during this 1 hour, who's been donating during the month of December. The one-off donations, the monthly donations, they also help a lot. Those are very important gifts to Blender. I will be sure to donate as well and show my little red box next week. And people say we do have a number. It was 3170, so we got 50 new gifts during the live stream. That is very sweet. People watching the live stream or people that just chose this time to do so. So thanks so much. I'll be again here next week. Thanks for joining us, and be ready because the audio is gonna get loud with Gilly. So everyone, thanks so much for joining. Thanks so much for being the show. If you have any questions or suggestions for next week, just write in the comments. Hope the audio was better this time. And goodbye.